Once we have written user stories and drawn out the user story map, the next step is UX design. And that's when we take the individual story statements and interpret them to create what's called a wireframe. And a wireframe is kind of like a basic drawing of how the user should interact with the app. So it might show some text here, a button down here, stuff like that. When we draw wireframes, we don't agonize over branding or colors. We're just trying to understand what the user should do. Eventually, we will advance those wireframes to the next step, but before we do that, we need some brand input from the client. So we need things like logos, colors, typefaces, any other design guidance that they want to provide to keep their app on brand. And using that guidance, we create an element library that we can then use to keep buttons, texts, other elements uniform throughout the app. So, if we decide midway through design that all the buttons need to change, it's easy because we just change it in the library and then it updates everywhere else. Once a wireframe is done and approved by the customer, we take the wireframe and turn it into high-fidelity mockup that looks just like the final app will look. We typically use online collaboration tools that allow you to review the mockups. You can leave comments and instructions for the designer, and then you can have this interaction with the designer in the tool about any questions. Once the designer has finished making changes, comments are closed out and all the mockups are done. Getting your mockups done is a huge deal because now you have something that visually looks like your app will look. But you haven't spent a ton of money building the actual app yet. And that's great because you can put those mockups in front of potential users and get their feedback. So you might have interviews or focus groups with people that might use your app. You might use those visuals on your website or your social media channels to pre-sell or build your brand awareness before you actually launch. Mockups are a great way to validate your app concept before you spend a dime on code. And we encourage you to do that. Mockups also enable us to get a more accurate cost estimate for the actual programming. And as the mockups unfold, a lot of details that we, meaning collectively with the client, those details get brought up and explored. And so we're able to identify things that we haven't thought of before. And that's one more step in providing an accurate price and sticking to that price. Mockups also get attached to individual user stories in our work management system. So when a developer starts building a specific story, the drawings are there attached to that story ready to go. So now the developer knows exactly what to build and how it should look. If you go to most other providers, they'll tell you that UX design costs about $15K per app. And while that is a reasonable price for someone who's ready to spend $80K on an app, if you're bootstrapping, you can expect somewhere between $6K and $8K with us, depending upon how many screens need to be mocked up.